What's up, everybody? Welcome to the State of Wild, episode 66, our regular YouTube video web series podcast thingy. My name is Meowth, and as usual, I'm joined by my two good friends, Roffle and Corbett. How are you guys doing today?
I'm doing all right. I had a pretty good week, but I just noticed there's something a little bit missing in my weekends in that, normally I spend them, mornings, afternoon, get a good long bike ride watching Grandmasters, and that was, notably absent this weekend. So I'm personally excited about this episode. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, I'm doing great. It was very fun with all the new mercenary stuff, but we might dig into that a little bit. But we're very excited here to have on the show, as you guys may have noticed the video watchers. But for the listeners, we have the great NoHandsGamer, America's GM, and Wild High Legend superstar. After picking up the format, NoHands, thank you so much for coming onto the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
For those that are listening that don't know who you are, do you want to give a kind of just a short intro?
Yeah, I'm a Grandmaster in the NA. I started playing back during Frozen Throne, and I play with the people know the name. I have chronic pain issues that are actually doing very well these days. But the reality is, there's a difference between very well and like playing with a mouse and clicking for 6-7 hours. So it's a thing of I've been using a hands-free setup both at my previous job. Right now I'm full-time content creator and competitor, but I use a complete hands-free setup. So I play Hearthstone without using my hands at all. And that's how I play, and that's kind of the name. And I've made a lot of decks in Standard. I've had good seasons in GM. This was the worst season where I had a 5-way tie for 5th with the worst tiebreakers. It was a brutal ending, but I got to get it out of my because you feel depressed just a week early, because then everybody else feels depressed in playoffs. So it's just you just get it out of the way, So it's but yeah, so I've made a lot of decks in Standard, and I just make Twitch and YouTube content, and I write occasional articles on Reddit. So yeah.
Yeah, it's great that you don't have to be depressed for the entire season. If you're playing an EU, you'd already know who's going to win before it starts. So yeah, it's a nice part of being about an America's GM.
That was only this season though. So before
Yes.
EU used to have the suspense of 80% Yarla and then 20% somebody else, but now it's just 100% Gabby. So
Yeah.
but. Next season, Gabby will win the first round, and then the second season, it could be anybody, 80% Yarla. So
yeah.
We appreciate you coming on the show. We've got lots to talk about the WoW format and all that kind of good stuff, as well as maybe diving into some mercs in Standard. But before we dive into the episode, we do have to take care of some housekeeping stuff. So first things first, if you guys enjoy the podcast, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that kind of good stuff, if you guys enjoy the content, make sure you guys drop a like, comment, and subscribe. It's a small thing, but it does support us a ton.
Yeah, you can also support the podcast by becoming a patron over at patreon.com/stateofwild, and you can pick up some cool perks in doing so.
And some of those perks include a whole bunch of stuff you get when you join the State of Wild Discord server. And hey, if you're not a patron, you can still come join the State of Wild Discord server to come chat about all things Wild Hearthstone.
All right, so let's dive into it. First thing, I know it's not Wild, but there was a pretty big thing that happened this week. We got the release of the new Hearthstone game mode, Mercenaries. So I don't know if you guys have played a ton of it, but I've been on that grind off stream. It's been my new work game, where like the 15-20 minutes I have before things I'm doing at work, playing a couple of bounties. Just generally, how are you guys feeling about the game mode and kind of the future of it?
I think it's pretty much exactly where I expected it to be. And I think right around kind of gauging the devs' temperature on it, right around where they expected it to. Initially quite popular because it's the new thing. But I think it'll probably rest, below Battlegrounds, above Duels in terms of the new game modes, and that's about where it's expected. Just in terms of longevity for it, I'm sure they'll be releasing new Mercenaries, new content, and keep rolling that out to renew interest. But even me personally, what I expected to get out of it is about what I've been getting out of it. I'm not a big fan of the PvE. I haven't been a big fan of PvE in any Hearthstone game mode, so like that's not a big surprise. I don't think I've done the Book of Mercenary or Book of Heroes, Book of Mercenaries at all. It's just not for me. But I do enjoy the PvP, so I've been grinding that quite a bit, which is good because I have a decent team, and like that's how I'm leveling my mercenaries for the most part, is just grinding out the PvP, and that's been pretty fun. It had a little bit more depth when I was first learning it, but then I worry that it does start to get a little repetitive just because and that could be the fact that I only have like a single cohesive team. So that may be just as part of my collection or part of the way that I'm interacting with the game. But like, I don't know that it has quite as much depth as I initially thought.
Yeah, the experience for me has kind of been similar to Roffle, where I don't think this type of content is super suited to me, especially the PvE stuff. Like, I'm much more of I want to be playing in a ranked system in a competitive setting. I want to play against other people. And so for that, I played it a lot on day one. And it's fine. For me personally, I have been surprised though. A lot of people are putting already like 30 hours into the game, and we're like 3 days in. There have been people who have just been playing to get the mode non-stop, and I think the team might have been a little bit surprised by just how much people have completely decided to dive in and just grind through it, because people are progressing really, really quickly through all that PvE stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's nice to have something new, even if it's not necessarily aimed towards me, I guess. No hands, have you actually been picking up any mercenaries, or just continuing off with the standard?
I played it for an hour on the first day, and I didn't even have the patience to open my packs, where I was just like 15 packs in, and then I don't know, it's a thing of, if I'm going to play, I just didn't get sucked in, and I'm like, and if I have to think, well, do I want to invest the time and energy to make content on this? Is that a good use of my time? And if I'm not liking this, like, am I going to like it more? Do I really? It's kind of a thing of. I remember when I was young, I didn't like bacon, and everyone's like, "How do you not like bacon?" And I was like, "Well, supposedly bacon's bad for you, so why should I try and make myself like bacon?" You know. So it's a thing of, if I already have my degenerate standard Hearthstone lifestyle, so I'm just, if I'm not, I don't necessarily need to add another. Like, the worst thing that could possibly happen is I'm like, I absolutely love this game, but then I just get out of GM because I'm not practicing standard. It's like just a temptation that I don't even need, so I'm not gonna try and have it if I'm not feeling it. But a lot of players, I'm hoping, so there's a Masters tour this weekend, and I'm hoping everybody gets addicted to Mercenaries, and they all just are just not on top of their decks, and then I can win the Masters tour. That's the 5-head play. So yeah.
Calculated release of Mercenaries, right? Just to see who the real dedicated players standard are.
Exactly.
Yeah. I will say, like, I think it's exactly, like Roffle said, I think it's exactly what I expected out of a mode like this. I'm a little surprised about, like, their monetization / pack system, because, like, I know it's the genre of the game, but I know Ixar had made, like, a huge deal about wanting other Hearthstone modes to be just like pick up and play without having to grind a collection and all that kind of stuff. So that's like a little surprising to me. But I don't know, for this genre of game, I think Mercenaries is actually super friendly. Like we talked about this on the podcast before, but like I've been jamming nothing but PvP, having some fun with that, but don't know how much I'm gonna play it once the hype dies down and I have like my one comp. And like, I wonder if they're going to do regular balance changes as well, like they do for, like, Constructed Hearthstone. Like, I wonder what the reception to that would be.
Yeah, I think that it will need some form of, active development on it in order to retain any sort of attention. But I think that they do have a team that built it, so there's a team dedicated to the game mode. To No Hand's point, like, I will say that it was a bit of a chore to get through the tutorial even, and there were moments where I was just like, is this worth it? And I'm in the end, I'm glad I did. It's kind of a nice idle game while I'm like watching a show in bed or something, or just being lazy, like waiting for a video to finish rendering. It's nice to have, but I don't ever really intend to create content around it, just because I don't know how engaging it is as a viewer. That said, like the release was the highest I'd seen Hearthstone on Twitch in years. So, like, there was some hype around it at least.
Yeah. All right. I think that's enough about Mercs. We aren't a Mercs podcast. If you are looking for that, I'm sure Hat has got one in the works soon. So just make sure you follow him on Twitter. And
it'll be the state of Mercenaries.
State of Mercenaries. It doesn't have the same ring to it,
Yeah, it doesn't.
All right, and the last thing before we kind of dive into the main content of the podcast. So by the time this podcast is released, there will be a Wild Vicious Syndicate report that has been published. So if you guys are interested in that, we'll drop the link down in the description. But some pretty surprising or not surprising information in that report, depending on kind of your perception of the format. But we'll be diving into that in our episode next week. But if you guys are interested in that, so for the first time in I think like a month and a half, 2 months, we're going to be getting a WoW report, which is awesome. So check that out if you guys are interested. All right, so let's just kind of hop into. No hands. You are our guest today, so we're gonna ask you a bunch of questions about a bunch of things in general, and then specifically about your thoughts on the WoW format. So first things first. Just kind of, would you mind talking about your experience as kind of just a GM in general, right? So obviously you're a very good player, but can you talk a little bit about all this extra stuff that goes into being a GM outside of just being good at the game?
Yeah, I think what's really hard about being a GM, there's two things. One is it's all about adapting quickly. So, because Blizzard, like every GM season, is doing just like nerfs every week. They'll do a nerf literally 12 hours. I've got a nerf less than 12 hours. They nerf at goes live at 1, and you have till, I guess maybe like 12, 14 hours till 3 in the morning to submit. And the best deck, 2 gets in the game, got massively nerfed. And you have to figure out what's good. Is the old deck still good? Is this? And it's so stressful. And so it's a lot of being able to adapt quickly and it's also hard if the meta changes. Well, you might have your decks, but all of a sudden it doesn't make sense to bring those decks. So you have to be very flexible. And if it's Conquest, especially, often your weakest link is where you get you. So let's say you bring 3 decks that you're the best in the world at and you play perfectly. And you bring 1 deck that's bad as your 4th deck and your opponent just 3-0s that. So you have to be just constantly looking for your leaks, and it's a huge amount of stress to keep up with it. And I think it's a lot of just being on top of things, because everybody's a good player in GM, despite what they say about NA. But everybody's really good, but you get lazy for 1 week or 2 weeks, where you're just not on top of things. The meta shifts, and you're not playing decks that you're really good at, because you can go play a deck, and I think I have this thing called good player bias, where when you're a good player, most of the time when you're playing on ladder, you're playing against players who are worse than you. And then all of a sudden you're in GM, and everybody's at your level, so you might think, oh, this deck is great, and then you play against someone who knows what they're doing, and you get wrecked. And because you just thought it was a good deck, you played it for 15 games, you're like, I'm bringing this. So you just have to be on top of your game. You have to try and know how to. I have all these rituals to get myself in the zone when I'm playing, so I can just try to play my best. And it's exhausting, but that's what it takes. And it's very competitive. It's just a massive amount of stress. So I'm looking forward to 4 months off where I can just play and have Twitch chat make me miss lethal, because it's always their fault. So that's going to be fun, So just try and do some new content ideas, do some coaching on the side. That's kind of, but yeah, it's been very, very stressful. So
yeah, imagine, especially with the kind of the constant threat of relegation and the frequency of relegation, like not only from pressure to do well, but pressure just to remain a grandmaster.
Yeah, it's you have to get it. I think I'm not sure what's the better mindset, the I want to win or I don't want to lose, because both of them have motivational merit, but I don't know if they could do. But both are wanting to win is more fun, but I don't want to lose. You know, keeps you like you're thinking about playing something else. You know, because you've already played 50 hours of Hearthstone this week, and you're like, nope, let's watch a video of somebody playing Hearthstone. Just keep going as much as you can. Just keep learning, you know. So, yeah.
Yeah, this past season of GM, I was never like a huge GM viewer, but I found this past season just so compelling. And I don't know whether it was the meta or whether it was just like a whole bunch of new faces. It felt like, you know, with the fact that the first GMs were invitational, like they were
Yeah.
very much, you know, based on who you were or who you knew, and a lot of those players were very deserving, obviously, to be in that first GM. But as time goes on, and you know, there's more relegation, and a lot of people, yourself, as an example, who you know came up and entered the system last year. I don't know. Something just felt really satisfying about seeing a whole bunch of players who very clearly really want to be there, very clearly do not want to get relegated, who are putting in the work, and it feels like it's just really nice, I think, to hear that behind the scenes. Like I say nice, but I guess I should say interesting. Just how stressful and how much work you guys do end up doing, especially with the constant balance changes that they've been doing over the past, you know, year or two.
And if you don't hear from them many much more because they get relegated. It happens all
Exactly.
the time. You know, people just get sick of the game for one season and they're out. Like happens all the time. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, myself included, like, I don't appreciate how much work goes into, like, the prep for GM. Just, like, watching streams and watching, like, the thought process and even just, like, talking to you here, like, I don't think I appreciate how much, like, prep goes in with just, like, not only just playing the game, but just thinking about games and lineups and stuff like that. And I don't think a lot of people do. And so, I guess... I know you talked about like good player bias, and I think that's something that I think is very prevalent in the WoW format, and maybe we'll talk about that. But I wonder, like, how do you distinguish between, like, okay, I found this deck that might be a little bit, you know, out there, it's a little bit off meta of what people are normally bringing, but I've been performing really well with it on ladder. So how do you distinguish between, okay, is this a good deck that's I should be bringing to GM or not?
Yep. Yeah, I've done that multiple times with my own, especially in week one. I'll bring a deck that nobody else brings. I don't like. I think I might have invented Dark Lair Warlock, but somebody else might have invented too. Kind of like a lot of people were playing it on day one of when Raised Dead became a thing, and I and I think Tom are the only people who brought it week GM. But then I like kept it under wraps. I know that it was a much stronger version in Wild. But this was back when it was a 3-mana 3/4, and I was mad at Wild because I loved this deck. And I was like, Wild, get it, my boy Darkglare nerfed over here, you know, because they can't handle how Warlock, because Warlock has been bad for a while, and it was nice to be good again. And then I have such a reputation now that I think I made the handlock kind of version. There was the Stealer Souls version, which was very OTK, very APM based, and I can't really. It's very hard for me to do I can do like moderate APM, but like the absolute, like, you have to do everything so quick, and it's hard, and it's like you have to just think super fast. I didn't want to do it, so I kind of made my own Warlock deck. And then but it was weird. Like 6 players in NA brought it, but like nobody in EU and Asia brought it. But it was a thing of just like and it's this annoying compromise too between streaming and keeping things secret, because like everyone can watch me on stream, and like it'll be like the Tuesday before the match, and like there'll be like 6 GMs in my chat. I'll say something like, you know, there's a lot of GMs, you know, that just lurk in my chat, and Nagadan and Luna and like Monsanto will all say, oh yeah, you know. So it's a weird thing. So that's one of the things that I don't like about GM is if you bring a great strategy, if it works, maybe you get like a 5-10% edge, which can be huge. But the next week everyone will copy you. And if you bring a terrible strategy, you go 0-2 and it's rough. So it's like you're kind of in this weird, there's a incentive structure where like the main reason outside of the joy of deck building to make decks is because it's like sick content. But from a competitive standpoint, the amount of effort you have to put in, it's usually not worth the ROI. So if you put all this time in, but sometimes you just like I just gotta make the deck because your heart says, oh, this is the shit, So it's but there's a lot of that where it just is this strategy. I know like Eddie brought Turtle Mage and did really well. I think one of my first season, and then people started bringing it in droves, like in future weeks, because all of a sudden, oh, this deck's actually just good, So it happens a lot, where you can get like 1 week of an edge, and then after that, everybody copies it.
Would you like it if the sort of the end of the season was more pushed very close to the start of a new expansion? So, for example, like maybe playoffs started like 2 or 3 weeks after an expansion came out, just because it does create this playoff atmosphere with a whole bunch of new stuff, and there is a lot more reward structure. Like you get a lot more rewarded, right, for innovation in the earlier in the expansion that you do it. Or do you think it's better the way it is kind of right now, where it's at the end of the season, it's much more about play, I guess, I suppose? Or
I would
don't know.
hate that because I think, especially as a content creator, if you're just a full-time competitor, I could do that, but there's like not enough money to just be a full-time only GM unless you're making it to Worlds every year. So it's a thing of realistically, like the best content is the first 2 weeks of the expansion, and even in GM, it's like, well, now you have to turn down like great content time, like people are watching streams, people are watching YouTube videos, and you have to put that aside to compete, and that's a huge opportunity cost. So it's a thing of just realistically, I actually really like stale metas. I know everybody
Yeah.
likes like constant novelty, but I like being able to play the same deck and just get really good at it and learning all the little intricacies and getting them down really well. Because my brain, stylistically, I'm not the fastest learner on the low end, but my skill ceiling is really high. So I might be learn something a little bit slower than other people, but I just keep getting better at it. So somebody else might be better on like they just pick something up than me, but then I just keep getting better. And that's kind of what my strength is as a player. So I can really practice decks and get really good at them. But like if I just have to play a bunch of decks without knowing the little intricacies of like, okay, you have to not do this here because they're going to do this play, or you just got to know. I'm trying to, you got to do this shadow step on this, like just little plays that you really won't just pick up intuitively. And maybe some players do, but I don't. But I learn them over time, and then I can master them really, really well. So I actually prefer like being able to put in that time to really get good at my decks. So, you know.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like watching competitive, I very much like towards the end of an expansion cycle because it is the best players on the best decks, right? Playing them the
And
best.
they know what they're doing,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I
yeah.
do think there is value to like I do like if GM starts like 2 weeks after an expansion, right? So that you do get to see the innovation and like you can gain an edge in GM. But I do think that like when it comes to playoffs, I personally enjoy it being kind of a solved metagame. I mean, I do think this is like a good transition point though to kind of the next question, right? So you are now full time competitor and content creator. So for those of you guys that don't know, No Hands, YouTube, Twitch, right, as well as
Yep.
coaching. So lots of content that you're putting out there. So what is the? I know we've touched on this a little bit, but what has like the transition been into full time content creation and competing, and like how do you balance the two of them, right?
Yeah.
I know we've been touching on that a little bit, but
I still haven't like figured out a lot of the content stuff, so I'm kind of getting better at that. But I kind of have the what's the social network where I'm just like, let's just try and make things cool. I'll figure out how to like make the big money later. So it's a thing of if I can just make it, things cool. And if I at the end of the day, who knows how long I do this. So if I end up doing this for 3 years and I make a little money on content and do some stuff and do some coaching and I end up doing something else, I think it's still like a great life experience. But it's a thing of. So I was surprised. So like Twitch kind of grew. My YouTube's grown a good amount in the last year, and I think it's just because like I make there's a market for people who know what they're talking about on like players who are regularly in top 100 legend. There's just not many YouTube content creators who can say like, this is what you do, this is actually what you do, this is important, this is not. I stole an idea. I don't know if you guys know, like I'm sure in the Warcraft 3, Grubby. I used to watch his streams, and he would have the over explain segment, and I stole that, and it's nice where I just kind of explain everything. And it's weird, those don't necessarily get the most views, but they're some of the most liked. So it's a weird thing with like that stuff, but I like the idea of like I have to create something. It's my previous job was in insurance, and there was very little creativity, and it was like, so it's nice to go to the other extreme where I have to come up with everything. So you just kind of have your brain and you say, this is what I think is good, and I think people like this, and I people like this, and you just try and put out what you think is good, and that's all you got at the end of the day. And you can do some, like, I know the easiest way to get views for me on YouTube is like deck guides, where I say this is the deck guide, and you say this, and that's a great way to get views. But I think I also like doing just my own random stuff where it's like trying to figure out the algorithm and stuff, and then Twitch is just kind of a lot of those like that consistency and but yeah, it's definitely, Hearthstone definitely feels like it's shrinking, but I'm not sure. It's always this weird, is my just anxiety just afraid of like the world's gonna end and Hearthstone's ending and everything's ending, or or is it just like, oh, it's people are bored of standard, they're gonna be having fun in standard in a month and a half, like not a big deal, don't worry about it. So but yeah, just trying to put out, it's fun putting out content and making stuff. Yeah, I discovered this is recently. My YouTube started just recommending me recently the Roffle clips, so I don't usually have the patience to watch, but the Roffle clips are just giving you these like 24 segments where like I said they'll never have Eater of Secrets or something like that, and then they have Eater of Secrets, and that's been going up. And that's like, I was like, that's a great idea, because you could just put these like 24-second clips for the algorithm. That's a nice one. I don't know. So yeah.
Yeah, it's fairly recently transitioned to full-time content creation myself. I resonate a lot with with what you said. I understand the anxiety of when your livelihood depends on it, like that concern of the shrinking nature of a game that's been out for as long as Hearthstone. So I reassure myself with two things on that. First of all, card games have an unnatural lifespan. So yes, it's possible that the Hearthstone itself, shrinks and maybe even has a bit of a wave to it with both the different expansions as well as just interest in general. And then on top of that, like, even if it is shrinking, I'm nowhere near the ceiling anyway, so there's still kind of room for me to grow in that. And I mean, I feel like it's a fairly established game that will always have people interested in it. I'm amazed at the number of people that come in and tell me that they're just picking up the game for the first time, and I'm like, I didn't know that still happened. And it's kind of I don't know.
They're picking up and going straight to wild.
In some cases, yeah. I personally don't necessarily advise that. Just because it's so hard. Like, the initial cost of entry is there, but longer term, it is easier, I think, to maintain a collection in wild, or a playable collection in wild once you get it, and then kind of build on it and have that deck or two that you hold on to when you come and go.
Yeah.
I have nothing to add here because I do not do the regular content creation thing. My regular content creation is this podcast, and so I've got nothing to add to that. Like, I am envious of you guys, because like, it's amazing that you guys are doing this, but also I do not envy all the stress and work that must go into doing this for your full-time jobs. And so like, I respect that 100%.
Yeah, I think that NoHands does have is in a unique position where, like you said, he's one of the few people above a certain rank playing at literally the highest level, sharing his insight in some of his videos. Like, I was checking out your YouTube before the show, and I like the ideas of like both the deck guides and kind of the just very narrow look at something like when to play Cult Neophyte, because like that's not necessarily as intuitive as people make it out to. And
Yeah.
so I think that like hearing that from somebody that is clearly put in the hours to think through it is there's an audience for that for sure.
I think there's a lot of, especially young players, who they understand this is what you do and this is what you like don't do. But one, they don't know why, and they think it's easy as well, and it's not as easy as they think. And whatever, maybe their brain works, but it's not. I think people will, once they learn something, they assume it's obvious, and a lot of things that we know are completely unintuitive. But we've kind of said, "Oh yeah, of course this," and then really, you know, now it's like, "Oh, of course we don't play any minions until turn 5. Why would we play minions?" But it's before it was like, well, why would we? I was coaching someone recently, and they're playing, a 1-drop on 1. I'm like, no, you don't do that. Why would we do that? And like, well, what about your tempo video? Like, forget everything you learned about tempo. Like, tempo is old news, And now it's all we play 30 cards in 1 turn. So yeah, so it's weird like that. So.
All right, so let's hop into talking about Wild a little bit here. So I do believe this is your second kind of foray into Wild. This is like the second time you ventured over here.
Oh, I've gone into Wild like 6 or 7 times.
Oh, really?
So I do it.
Okay.
I've probably got like 250 hours of playtime in Wild. So I know back after about a year and a half into playing, they had that, I don't even remember, they had like an actual, like if you got top 100 in Wild, you guys probably remember.
The Wild Open
tournament.
Yes.
Yeah, and I was trying really hard to get into that, and I had my chronic pain was real bad, and that's actually led me to some stuff. But I was trying to play Odd Paladin, and my neck started hurting from just like hitting the 1/1s over and over. And I kind of eventually I got some strategies to lower my, because I have not just hand pain, I have other pain, but I got some strategies kind of from. But like, I was playing. I got rank 3 Legend in Wild playing Odd Warrior, where I was just farming even shamans, and I just queued into like a ton of even shamans for a day, and then I really like, but you can't really play Odd Warrior. I mean, I guess you can, but it seems like it's if you don't have it doesn't seem there's like a defensive. It's hard to play defensive decks in both Wild and Standard now. You just you just gain 50 armor, and then someone goes Mecha Cthulhu, right? So it's a little tough for that, but yeah, I played a bunch then, and then I'll just every once. It seems like I often at the end of an expansion, if I'm getting sick of the Standard meta, go play Wild for a few days, and that could be fun. Yeah. So it's I've played a decent amount. I think. I stopped playing it for a while in the Snip meta because I was just like, screw this. Like, if this is, because it's literally my biggest, like, just having to put these snips over and over again. And it's not even like fun APM, because if I can play a bunch of cards, that's a little bit easier, but I have to like get it right there, right next to it over and over again. It's just the worst kind of APM for me. And I was like, screw this, so I didn't play for like a year after Snip meta because I just didn't like that deck existed. But
I don't think very many people liked that deck existed, and I think a lot of people quit for a very long time after that. I don't think you were alone.
Yeah.
So you do play Wild a lot more than I initially thought. So I mean, I guess just kind of start broadly, like outside of Snip. How has your experience been in general? Do you enjoy the format, and like, I guess what's appealing about the Wild format to you?
Yeah, it's good, and it's interesting where I think the biggest thing in Wild is like everything. There's just way better synergies because some of the cards aren't like I think players are as a good deck builder. Players really look at cards too much in a vacuum, where it's all about how it relates to its own cards, how it relates to the meta. So like Celestial Alignment was a terrible card in last meta, and people thought it was trash. And, it had its meme Cthulhu version, and now it's a really solid card that is, that counters these quest decks. So there's what it's cool is just seeing what's good in wild, and as you can kind of explore like, oh, this is when you like have literally every synergy, and there's you want a self-damaging card, and there's 40 of them, where in standard you have like 6 options and 3 of them are terrible, so stuff like that. But so yeah.
Yeah, I think that is something that came up, a lot when we've been talking about when Secret Mage was relatively strong in the past. You couldn't really isolate it to a single card. It was just the synergy between the secret mechanic and Mage and some of the secret cheats. And then even this came up with when Seedlock was quite powerful. Like, you ask 30 people what the problem card in Seedlock is, and they'll give you 30 different answers. Like, it's like, in fact, listing out just the entirety of the deck list by the time you get done with it. So it's like, yeah, I think that like you said, looking at cards' strength in a vacuum is, incomplete, because they interact with other cards in the deck that make it, or that lead to some of the oppressive nature of some of the stronger decks in the format.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, just really powerful decks, because it's also, my rank is so bad in Wild, so I get to go Q in Wild, and I just do nothing but win. I don't have to play. I can play a bad deck, and if I at least on my NA account, if I play a bad deck on Standard that I'm not good at, it's just like, oh, there goes 2 weeks of rank work. I drop from like 10 to 200 in a day, and then you gotta like grind back up. And then your Twitch chat could be like, so what happened? Like, I thought this was a rank 16 stream, Like, what happened? Did you lose it? And I've lost it so many times that I know I can get it back now. But like some of the first times you lose it, you're like, oh, I'm bad now, Like I thought, I just, I thought I was good at this game, but I guess I just was a fluke, And now I've really mastered the art of getting good again. But it's a reality of when you're first doing it, you don't know like what's a fluke and what's a how do you get back that high rank or that high tournament success if you aren't doing well this week, so and it's going to happen to everybody has bad weeks, so yeah.
I used to find that a lot, whether it's getting back to a certain rank or it's your first time hitting legend, right? You're always so nervous, and then eventually it doesn't matter, and then it's the same thing. Like your first time hitting top 10 legend, it's insane, and then you just keep doing it over and over. And so it's the same with anything.
Yeah.
So no hands. What's been your decks of choice? I guess last time you've been playing Wild. What have you been jamming?
This one, I think the deck I liked the most, even though it's hard for me, was the Celestial Druid with the Mana Feeder Panther, with the Mechathune. It's and I shouldn't, so I like a lot of APM decks, even though I have terrible APM. It's this weird paradox. It's like somebody who loves cheese but is lactose intolerant. So I love the APM deck. So it's nice but yeah, the Celestial is real fun. I think in the last expansion, I still really like the Dark Lair decks, because I really love Dark Lair in Standard, and I think this time I had a much lower win rate on my climb to Legend, but I think I climbed with Dark Lair with not a lot of experience, and I think I went like 20-3 to Legend or something ridiculously, because it's just so good when you play it well, and I like that. It's very fun too. Just you gotta get your mana, and you gotta do like the counting. Okay, this is gonna go down to this mana. I'm gonna get this much more mana, and I have to make sure I have this much life. But also they might have fireball, so I can't. So it's that can be very fun. And I really liked Quest Mage with Giants when I played a little bit of that. I think I got a legend with that. That deck was really fun, specifically with the Giants. I don't like it with the fireballs. I think with Archmage but the Giants are fun. I like the Giants. So.
Oh, I'm so happy about this. Happy.
Like
I'm so unhappy about this.
Yeah.
No, can you just come defend these decks every week? There's about time we got another Dark Glare Quest Made and Enjoyer on the show.
All right. Okay. For what it was worth, Dark Lair is a very interesting deck. It was just uber nuts and broken and needed to be nerfed. So, Quest Mage, I mean, I kind of want to ask you this question. So like you mentioned like your love for APM decks, right? I mean, what are
Yeah.
your thoughts on stuff like Ignite Mage?
It's there's no like it's really a case that the devs are right that created by like because everybody complains about created by. They're like, oh, there's just a meme. Oh, created by, and then they say, hey, we're going to give you like basically an ignite deck that does the exact same thing every time. It draws your elemental, it discounts, and then it just does ignite over and over again. Seems super lame. Like I haven't actually played it, but it just instinctively the fact that it just there's no like with quest mage you have to know it's like, oh, I have to go for it now, or oh, I can just try and win on board here. You know, there's that element of there's a whole bunch of different ways to win within your win condition, and the more one dimensional your win condition is, I think that's boring. So it just seems like way less cool than the quest mage of before, where you got all these random spells. You got the giants. Do you just win with tempo? What are some cool things you can do? Like, can there's all this cool stuff you can do. So yeah,
I think it's also just kind of like that ad type of APM that you mentioned with Snip Snap, where like not even from you personally, but from like just a player perspective, it's just repeated actions
yeah,
incessantly, like for no reason. Where like at least with something like the Mechathun Druid or even Quest Mage, where you have to make decisions about the cards you play
yeah,
in the order that you play them while you're, making those quicker actions. Whereas like you're just repeating one thing over and over again with an Ignite Mage and Snip Snap, so it's just like it feels
yeah.
pointless and not really engaging for me either as a player. It just seems like okay, I throw
Picking
another
up
Knight
that
at their
card
face.
coming off the top too is like really annoying. There's something about you. It's coming. Oh, did you press it too soon? Oh, nope, it didn't work.
Yeah,
It's miserable. Yeah,
it is. I am in complete agreement with you on that.
yeah.
Yeah, I have to imagine the Mechathun Druid no hands though. That must have been very, very tough because that deck you have to play so many
You
cards
have to
so
play
quickly with
literally
that
all of your
specific deck.
cards in one turn.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
literally all your cards.
Well, I learned you can just, at least at the rank I was, you can just say, you can just botch it and you still gain like 30 armor and make a board. And if I've learned this with Garrote too, where realistically, a lot of times you can, if you're not on top of your five head, like you can just take a slower win and it's going to work 98% of the time. And then 2% of the time you might get punished, but you can accept you're not a perfect player and just go for the 2 turn lethal. So, but there is a certain funness to like, playing everything, but it's definitely, I've gotten good enough where like, there's actually a lot more time at that last part of the rope than you think. But I did know when I first started playing WoW, I didn't have the foot pedal yet, and the foot pedal increases my APM a lot because I used to use what they call dwell clicking. So I would be kind of like hold in place. So I'd be like, all right, and I'd have to hold the mouse in place for about like half a second. So like cards like Unleash the Hound were miserable, right? I have to like go this, and if you're like excited or in a tournament, sometimes like my neck would start twitching. So like I can't even hold in place. So I've had like literally like games that were lost because so that's kind of what my play style is a lot in tournaments. Why I prep so hard because I historically haven't had the same APM luxuries as people. So I just like I know when I watch somebody and they're like 70 seconds in with Garou Rogue and they still haven't done anything. I'm like you got to do this right away. You don't have the time. So it's you're crazy and then sometimes I think sometimes they make it, but sometimes people just they don't have enough time and they mess up and I'm like because they just think they have enough time and at the end of the day like you still have to make decisions and human beings have bad APM unless you're a former RTS pro, you probably have bad APM as well. So yeah.
Yeah. I guess relating more to kind of the crossover between standard and wild. So I know that there was a lot of reaction to the quest lines in standard, and it's still kind of like a very polarizing set of cards in standard. I know a lot of people like them, a lot of people dislike them. I don't know how many quest lines you played against in your trip to wild, but I mean specifically like the quest warriors and the quest hunters are the decks that are like super popular
Yeah.
and they're super strong. So I'm just interested in like your thoughts on just quest lines in general, specifically because they'll eventually rotate it out of wild or out of standard, right? And they
Yeah.
are going to be a problem for standard. But I'm interested in your thoughts on like what you think the impact of those are going to be, kind of
Yeah,
moving
I,
forward.
I've laid in bed. I think quest lines will single-handedly destroy Hearthstone forever. It's a thing of I really worry that I'm probably catastrophizing, classic like it's gonna be fine, whatever. But it's a thing of like how can a slow value deck ever compete against infinite ignites with in my meta it's +3 spell damage, and your meta how can these things ever compete with that? It's like, or how can so that's also just ignite, or how can or for warlock infinite fatigue damage. um there's these things where it's like very there's certain just forces and quests that are just very hard to compete with, and they're very meta defining. So quest might not be that good, but it's the problem is like the moment I start disrespecting the quests and bringing things that aren't good against it, they just all of a sudden the win rate goes way up. So they're just kind of very limit uh, design of like different decks to can you beat the quest? Like can you win on if you're playing in the standard meta, can you win on turn 7 or 8? If not, like you can't win. Like you have to be able to win by turn 7 or 8 realistically. Warrior can make it a little bit later because they have armor gain, but in general, you like now you have that time limit, and if you're a deck that doesn't do that, you're not going to be a good deck. Um, but yeah, I also think is like it's I do think it's kind of that boring where it's like I think there's like the beginner things where beginners love certain cards, and the joke like, oh, if you're a deck builder, like you put some brooms in, you put some scorpidates in, and you're a deck builder. And everybody, I remember back in the Highlander, everyone was like, oh, why don't we make this a Highlander deck? Like everybody wanted to. I think when I started deck building, Highlander was great because it like gives you some limitations. You're like, I have to put one of every card, and that actually really helps you by giving that limitation. But at least as someone who's like more an advanced deck builder, I like the anything can happen. Where if you're a quest, you're like, well, if I'm playing quest mage, I have to put some fire spells in, I have to put some ice spells in, I have to put some arcane spells in. I have to put these three things in. I have to put mostly spells, because I don't really want to put minions. So it's just hugely limiting on the design of the deck. And I think some like the coolest decks come for when there's lots of opportunity. When you have like 6 cards you need for a deck, and then the other 24 are whatever you want. Like I think that's cool. And quest, it's like, well, okay, if I'm playing this deck, I'm gonna put these cards in. I'm gonna put these cards in. I have to put these cards in. So there's not that much like, I don't know how you're like in wild like does Quest Hunter have a lot of variation? Is there like, oh, this is like the cool? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what decks like Quest decks have like, oh, or
Well,
Pirate Warrior like what I'm not sure if it has a lot of variation. Just pirates and
so like
you know.
Quest Hunter, I think right now has the most variation because it's got
Oh,
6 really bad cards in it, and so those last
oh
6 cards can be anything, and they have
yeah,
like 24, 25 really good cards. Whereas I
that
think Pirate Warrior right now, like it's 28 out of the same 30 cards, and then you have like flexibility in the last 2 slots. And then like
yeah,
even stuff like the Celestial Druids, right? All of the combo druids for a very long time now have been like the same 26 card core, and then whatever like 4 or 5 card win condition that you want. Um, so to answer your question, the quest deck's not really a ton of variety,
yeah,
unless you count the 6 bad cards as variety.
yeah, yeah. So it's a big hunk of meat with different spices, but the meat's always the same.
Yeah,
So yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it's interesting you say that though, because I feel the same way. I do not like what quests are doing, just not only deck building but also
Yeah,
just like gameplay. So
and I'm worrying that they're going to be around for another 2 years. So it's like, well, how do? But I did do this, and this is probably less than wild, but um, I talked about another design thing I'd like changed is the power creep of single target removal specifically, where single target removal is so insane now. I don't know sure like every class has a 3 mana destroy a minion. It feels like there's so many. You have Coerce for Rogue and Warrior. You have Shadow or Death for 2 mana for Priest. You have Mage has. Pretty sure Mage does Mage have a good single target removal right now? Maybe not. but like
It's just
demon.
viable, right?
I mean, you just
Yeah.
have like the burn
Yeah.
spells, right? That you could point at minions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but like, there's just single target removal so good, where and then AOE is really good too. So it's a thing of like it's hard to get a minion advantage. So it's just kind of, but minions still suck except for battle cries. So like there used to be like carnivorous cube or stuff that was like really annoying to remove. Um, and there's nothing's really that like either you have minions that you must remove or you lose the game. Like you're playing against a rogue and you don't remove field contact, you lose the game. So so either you have that kind of stuff or you have minions that it's not a big deal if you remove them at all. So it's this weird thing where I played something classic when that came out, and I was just I was late to the game, and I was just surprised like how often like you just don't remove each other's minions because it's awkward. So it's this weird thing where like everything's super clean. You develop your own board, you remove their board, you deal some damage, you draw some cards. Then they do the same to you. Where it used to be this kind of, I'm not sure. I don't want to go back to classic, but I think the coolest thing about Hearthstone is the board, and I think I'd like the incentive structure to make it so board matters and decks play for more board and longer board interactions. I think that's cool. So that's kind of where I'd like the game to go back to. But how often? Like I know Corbett's playing more standard. Are you guys? Is it? Is it the grass is greener where I'm going to play wild because I don't like the standard meta, and you guys are coming to standard because you don't like the wild meta? And,
Yeah, I really do think that's a large part of it. I really think there is a big grass is greener situation going on, and it's very natural, right? Because we're in the 3rd month of the expansion, and then like this is the part where everyone's burnt out. We're not getting the mini set, yada yada. I don't know, like I really like standard right now because it feels very wild light. It feels like how wild might have been not too long ago. Like a year or two ago, and I've had a really great time kind of exploring the format, and it's been super fun. But it is funny that you point out that grass is greener because it feels like at every point at this stage, no matter what format you're playing, BGs, standard, wild, whatever, no one plays arena, so whatever. You're always going to be saying, here are the problems, here's what's wrong, I'm going to go enjoy doing something else.
Yeah.
That's a little bit how it feels like to me. Like, I suppose. Is there anything specifically in Wild that, like, if you had to pick one thing from Wild that you, like, one specific aspect of it that you were enjoying more than standard, is there something that stands out? Or do you just think it is the fact that it is something new? Like, it is something different after you've been grinding so much Hearthstone for GM?
Yeah. I think there are certain decks that I, like, Dark Glare got taken from me in standard, like, before, too soon, you know? And then it was, like, I didn't play the Stealer Souls version, which was a lame version of Dark Glare, but I played a little bit of Dark Glare Warlock and Dark Moon Fair, like sort of the Zoolock, but it kind of got worse as the meta got developed. But it just sometimes can be nice to like, if there's a cool card that you can go and play, and it actually is like the synergies haven't been destroyed or it hasn't been nerfed to the ground, like that can be fun. Where it can. So I think like the part of the reason I liked the Quest Mage is I really liked in Scholomance. Is it Scholomance or Scholomance the small spell mage that was all about like putting the giants and had Astromancer and Evocation, and I was really good at that deck and I really enjoyed that deck, and then it got like many decks taken from me, so it was it's another lost love. So I just go over to Wild, and it's like, oh, this concept of I play the Cyclones, the Sorcerer's Apprentices, the discounts, the playing a bunch of cards in one turn, the swing turns of like I'm gonna freeze all their minions, kill some, and then play a bunch of giants and win. I think that can be very fun. So I think like the decks that you were good at and then got nerfed, going to play Wild, like if they have a Wild version, even like Quest Mage is it's a different deck, but the main thing is it still does Sorcerer's Apprentice Cyclone, but it has a different win condition, So
it's so funny that you say that because the meme of Wild is the place to play your old decks is sort of a running joke in the community because every single time there is sort of some imbalanced format, inevitably someone will ask Ixar on Twitter, like, hey, when are we fixing this? When are we doing these? When are we getting balance changes? And they'll talk about wild balancing, and he will say, well, we think wild is a place where people can go play their old decks. And they'll complain that they can't play their 2017 Kelseth Tempo Rogue anymore. But like you were saying, there is this nice transition where you can sort of revisit types of archetypes that you used to play. But just
Is Kelseth used in any meta decks anymore?
Kelseth hasn't existed since
Since 2017.
2020, yeah, 2017. Like by the time he rotated.
Yeah.
Baku and Gen are around a lot. They were very recently, like before the quest lines popped up, they were still quite dominant. So quest lines actually kind of just pushed out Baku and Gen a little bit, it feels like, as this sort of maybe it's kind of a similar story potentially with what's going on in standard.
But I mean
maybe it's the same thing.
You do have Baku in Odd Hunter, and you do have Gen in one of the best decks in the format as well. So it's like they're not completely absent. It's just they're not as prevalent as they were prior to quest lines.
They can't.
Yeah,
like,
for some reason.
Yeah.
For some reason, I just completely blanked that Baku was in Odd Hunter. Like, I don't know, that was just a quest deck in my head for some reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, speaking of the grass is greener, you touched on that, and I think for a lot of the wild player base, the grass is very green. When we look over to see the competitive stuff going on in standard, we would love to have some sort of competitive incentive and competitive formats and things like that. Some the Open Cup that you're talking about when you were trying to qualify. So that was I guess 2018-19 when you said you came over to try out for the wild Open. Do you remember much about how that exactly went? Like, do you remember how close you were to qualifying or anything like that?
I think I was ranked 3, with like 15 days left, or maybe there was like 10 days left. And I was debating whether I wait, and I was kind of in the mindset of like, I'm not even good at wild. I need to keep practicing. And then I eventually like went on a loss streak, and then tried to get up, and then I think I ended up at like rank 130, so it was just kind of out of the margin. But like you were gaining like 8 ranks of win, so it wasn't at the end. Didn't even feel like I was actually close, even though I was rank 130, because I had to win like 5 more games in a row to get top 100. But yeah, it was fun, and I think even like decks got invented in that time. I think like there was the Jakaso Hunter, where he came up with like the kind of version of sort of mid-range, using the scavenging and the 1/1s to make like there was like a powerful hunter that got a version in wild that I don't think was there before he came. So I think sometimes you when you get those new set players, all of a sudden just more people. A lot of deck building is like you're kind of limited to your own brain says like I like this and I don't like this, and just different people are gonna have different perspectives. So when you get a bunch of people in there, you're just more likely to somebody comes up with the perfect answer that destroys even lock and odd hunter and makes them completely irrelevant. It's maybe if enough people from standard they'll come up with that. So I don't know how, but it's maybe, and then everyone can go back to playing, I don't know, Kelseth Rogue.
Well, I guess that leads me into like another question that I want to ask. So, how do you think that Blizzard could get more people to play Wild? Is it just the competitive incentive that's missing that'll bring people over to the format?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge element, because that's kind of the element that will make it feel more than I'm just playing a video game. Like it makes it feels higher. So I kind of have the attitude, if you're just playing a game without without creating content, without this, like for like 8 hours a day, and you're not competing, you're not making content, your stuff, it's going to be very unsatisfying. Like you're going to feel crappy unless you're maybe 16 and your body can still take that. But like if you're an adult, you're like, what am I doing with my time? But if you're like, well, I'm competing and like I can win this, and like that can fulfill a higher need. And then so just if Blizzard like just put on like two $5,000 tournaments a year, even that's like chump change, that would probably get. And I don't even know why they don't do that. It's just like they have wild packs, like literally players are just gonna like buy wild packs against, like it would easily like pay for itself. It's such a good, like, easy idea too. It's like, so just do 2 wild tournaments a year, or if you're generous, you can do 3, but maybe they don't do one in like the December because they're on vacation. But like, I don't know how, I gotta go talk to Bobby and say, hey, like, can you give something for the wild tournaments? I think you'll end up making more money in the long run, I swear. So, but it's that would be nice, because it's not even like a hard thing to do. And now that they have the packs, like, like, nothing makes people spend more than, like, okay, I want to test out this deck, and they play it once and they lose with it and they have to go buy more packs. So, I mean, just making, I think, wild being cool long term is good for their bottom line, especially like just a little bit of like investment compared to like the vast amount. It's gonna, because I'm speaking in the money talks. I'm not being like, hey, you should just do it wild. It's the right thing to do. I'm not like, that's not how. They're not gonna be like, oh, we just thought it would. We just didn't think it was the right thing to do to make tournaments. We thought that was, everyone would be really angry. Like, that's not what it is. It just, somehow in their bottom line, they have this and they have this budget, and they say, this isn't important, and they should think it's important. It just makes sense. Like, there's enough players, and getting people, if they've already disenchanted their wild collection, they have to re-enchant it. But if people just keep their wild collection, well, then they're having less free ducks for standard. So if people think, well, I should keep the wild, there's opportunities there. Like, they end up getting more money in the long run. So it's like, they should do that. I don't, I'm sure there's some complicated reason why they don't do that, but they should fix that. So it's in their interest long term. So I don't know why they wouldn't, like, long term.
It's very nice to hear somebody who's not a WoW player say the same thing that a lot of WoW players have been asking for. It makes me feel a lot better about it not being an us issue.
Well, yeah, I think that there's definitely something to that incentive for playing the game mode, which is lacking right now. Mm-hmm. I mean, I got into WoW to qualify for the first Wild Open, and like continued playing it because they had the second one. So it's like a lot of people, prominent members of the community, switched to Wild because of those Wild Opens, and then they just kind of stopped. And so it's like, and you get fewer players moving over because there's not much incentive beyond just enjoying the format.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely an interest in the WoW format, right? Like, whenever, like, No Hands, whenever Pheno and Tice, like, when they swap over to Wild, there's a huge population that, like, stay and watch the WoW format, right? And Roffle's having a lot of success, Dane's having a lot of success. Like, there is a genuine interest for the WoW format, right? Yeah. And I just don't think that there's, like you said, there's no incentive for people to play it, right?
Yeah.
And I think if you give people incentive, people are going to come and they're going to play it. Who knows if they'll stick around, but like, even if you have 10% of the people that play the format stick around, I think that's a huge boost for the WoW player base. Not only monetary wise for Blizzard, but also just like you mentioned earlier, the more people that play the format, the more innovation that you have on deck list, and not even just maybe making new decks, but just like how to beat the best decks, right? And so like you said, I don't know why they haven't done it. It's something that we've talked about on the podcast multiple times about. But
I mean, I just think if it's weird because I've had this in insurance. And you have these big corporations, and you have like the give money department, you have this department, and this department might be like, yeah, we're all on board on the Wild tournament, and then the money department's like, I don't know, and it's weird because like it's like as a whole, like if you just looked at like if Blizzard gives money to Wild, a small like 10,000, which is minuscule, and even in Wild, like compared to the overall revenue they bring in, I think you can make a very clear case that over time that's going to, their stock price will go up. Like, maybe they give 10,000 this, and then their stock price goes up to 20,000. Like, because that's what they're gonna care about, but they don't even do it. So it's weird. It's like it's in their interest, I think. Maybe it's not in their interest to make like a big tournament, but like some financial and like Blizzard run things with it's a little bit of money, a little bit of prestige. You could say this is the Wild. They have they get some broadcaster working from home to cast it. there are ways. So it's weird that it's all these weird things. And this, I don't think this is unique to like Blizzard. I think this happens at a lot of corporations where there's stuff where it just like would really make sense, but from whatever the incentives within the company don't make it so it happens. So I don't know how to do that. I think people keep talking about it and say like this is like a good use of your money. Like it's not, because I know, like I said, if you're like, hey, like, don't you care about the little wild children? And they'll be like, yeah, that's not really. Like, I mean, yes, we care. We just can't, at this time. But if you say, hey, like, you're gonna make more money than you paid, like, I think that's the reality, and I think they will. Like, so it's, just like you said, like people got into Wild. I've probably spent just personally $200 more on the game at least from Wild that I wouldn't have, like, buying other packs and not disenchanting cards. So just for me having the Wild, they've gotten more money off me. So it's just like there's a lot of people that I'm sure they just like, if they make Wild cool to not just like the niche community, like this is something that's just cool. Like you play in a tournament, you could have like thousands, because tournaments would be crazy in Wild because there's just so many. Like the meta could be crazy because you could make a hard targeting, a certain deck. There's a lot of really weird things you could do that you probably couldn't do in standard because there's so many tech options. So like it would actually be really interesting in the long term. And so yeah, it's weird. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir, but yeah, it's like it's you guys, wait, so you guys are against like a Wild tournament, right?
Oh yeah, no,
absolutely.
Terrible idea.
Yeah,
It would just it would lose its romance of the Wild. It would just be
I'd
this
leave.
raw competition. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Something I am surprised by that I think could be really fun. Like you're talking about making Wild cool and providing giving it a platform. Something that I thought, I don't know, maybe it's a dumb idea, but maybe have the GMs play a week of Wild, not for points, like nothing that affects their actual standings, but give them a week off, still have the prize money there, so that way there is actual incentive to try. But like use this platform as sort of give the GMs a week off, have them play Wild for 1 week or something. I'm kind of surprised that Blizzard hasn't looked a little bit at using the GM system a little bit more for that, as showcasing some other game modes or showcasing other things like that. And again, sort of baking in viewership towards their GMs, who they are trying to give like a good platform to.
Yeah, it's weird where they think, I think there's a lot of stuff where like, oh, they think about that, and then they're like, well, we'll get back to you, and then they just, so it's I think ideas like that have been thought about, and and it might be 3 years from now, like, hey, we finally got the tournament with the GMs playing Wild, like we listened to your feedback, we watched episode on 66 of the Wild podcast. We're like, this is great. Then after we finally got approved, now we're gonna do it. So just everything moves slow. So which is unfortunate, but I think it could happen. It seems like a good idea, but it's just a slow moving machine. So yeah.
Is that something that you'd be like really into though? That kind of concept? As a GM?
Yeah, I mean, I think that could be, I think the thing that GM, because they've also talked, people want to say like, can we do a Battlegrounds week? And so there's an element of the moment, if you make it actually count for points, it's going to be really controversial because like players who play Battlegrounds are going to be like, or like if you're a Wild player and you can come up with a sick lineup, you're gonna get an edge, but it's at the end of the day it's standard. So I think I'd like that where they have like maybe like 2 things in the week where it's like maybe they put some money on it, but they don't put the points on it. So, or even if they do points, they do it an incredibly small amount of points. So it's people can take it seriously if they want, but I don't know. I'm not exactly sure, but I'd like something like that, So I think that could be interesting.
I mean, GMs is like the best Hearthstone players, right? That's kind of the allure for GM. And I feel like the best Hearthstone players, there's a lot more to Hearthstone than just standard. Like, that's always been my mindset. And it's like, I know previously, in Magic, they had multiple formats that contributed towards the results for tournaments, right? They had, like, their draft or their limited or their, like, arena portion. Like, even this past World Championship, they had a standard portion and they had like a draft portion. So it's very weird to me that GMs is only standard, right? There's
Yeah.
no like there's no other formats, and that feels weird to me to just say standard is the only mode that matters, which makes sense, like
Yeah.
why it matters the most, but there is a lot more that contributes to like the best Hearthstone players. You know, I don't know if that's just me
Yeah.
coping and saying wild is a relevant format, but
Yeah. Yeah. I think it'd be, it's a thing of like, they could, dip their feet in, and say, okay, experiments, and say, all right, we're gonna put this tournament through this, and put a very small amount of money, and I think, and see like, okay, we, we we put like this amount of money into Wild, and we see, did packs go up? Did this go up? Did they could do those metrics, and I think those kind of experiments are crucial for the long term health of a game or a company in general. Just like trying things out and seeing, if I already have, they're making a whole new game mode, and it's like you got this game mode right here, and you've already done all the designing. It's all there, You could just keep, running on that, You don't have to. So it's I do think that also the ideas of that they've thought about, I think of not necessarily doing, because sometimes Wild has so many cards, but saying like we're gonna have maybe this season we're gonna have a certain ladder where you have this expansion, these 5, and maybe they're not even, they could be together, they could be not, and then so you just have a different combination of old cards. That could be cool. I don't know if that'd be popular, but like you could do something like that too, where you say, okay, you're using these old cards, and that way people are playing their old cards, and there's lots of cool stuff you could do that I think relative to the size of Hearthstone could be very like a good time and money investment for Blizzard, but it just doesn't seem to be happening.
So, moral of this story, Abar, Ixar, whoever's out there listening, wild tournaments, please, right? Even your standard GMs are saying that they're a good idea. Come on.
Yeah.
So, I guess one last question. I don't want to hold you hostage all night, but one last question. Is there like a wild specific card or deck that isn't currently top tier, but you think has the potential to be busted in the future, right? You get 1 or 2 more pieces of support, and it's going to make a really, really strong wild deck. Is there anything out there that you've seen in your experience?
I don't know. It's weird where like so many things when I go to Wild have been figured out. So I haven't had any like even good. I keep trying to make even Paladin good because that was like my favorite deck of all time in Standard, where it's my first #1 legend, and I played the Corpse Taker version back in the day, but like I really loved that deck, and I've been playing it. I think I had like a 55% win rate, like rank 2 diamond, and then I switched to Aggro Priest today to like finish up, and then I had like an 80% win rate to hit legend. But so there's a big difference. You're like, oh, this is okay, 55% win rate, and then you're like, oh no, but it's I don't know. I'd like to try some stuff, but it's such a I always feel like there's got to be at least like hidden tier 2 gems. Maybe there's not a hidden tier 1 gem, but hidden tier 2 and tier 3 gems that are fun, interesting decks, but just nobody's figured out, So, but it just, you don't know where they are. So it's like I don't know. It's weird some of the cards that aren't even seeing play anymore, because you have that thing both in Standard and Wild of like, I'm not sure what turn do you have to win the game by in Wild in general? Is there like a turn?
6, 7 is
Right
usually
now, it's
about
like
it.
6, yeah.
Uh,
That's like,
That's why you're looking to do it.
yeah.
Yeah,
so-
very fast.
uh,
I mean, it's like you said with Caliseth, right? Where you're surprised that Caliseth is still kind of irrelevant.
yeah, because that card was so like, that was in so many decks for a while. You just like take out the 2 drops, put in the Keleseth. But I guess if the game goes to turn 6, it's only, you draw 4 cards. It's max +4/+4, So it's not as good if the game goes long, right? So you just 4 minions. I mean, you could get card draw, but still, So
Yeah, Kaliseth fell off a bit when Patches lost charge as well, just because
Oh,
having
yeah.
a 2-2 shootout value trade was a pretty big deal.
Yeah. Maybe they'll give him rush. They. I'm rushing
He's
it.
still a mega busted as he is.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when he's a 5/5 again with Embiggen and Aggro Druid.
Yeah.
The concept that you touched on there about the whole hidden tier 2 and tier 3 decks, it's something that we've talked about a lot, because a lot of people do sometimes perceive Wild as, oh, there are all these insane meta breakers like tier 1, like people just are bad and they haven't figured it out. And I don't really think that's the case, but I do agree with you that I think that there might be some remotely competitive stuff that is sort of out there. The thing is, the
Yeah.
power level of the format is so high that usually it's very apparent, it feels like, whether something is good or something is trash. And you can kind of spot it relatively easily. Wild actually was very interesting this season, or this expansion at launch, where Standard went through like a couple weeks, it felt like, where people were playing a lot of jank. There was a lot of experimentation. There was so much nonsense, and people didn't know what they were doing, and it felt like every day things were changing. I don't know. That was at least my perception of things. Maybe that was not accurate, but
Yeah, Garrote Rogue took a long time to get like the well-defined, because it originally was running Auctioneer and Sharks and wasn't like the field contact package, and then took a while for that deck to get developed, even though it's the best deck in the game now. So
yeah. And Wild was just like super harsh, like right out the
Just
jump.
right
Everything
away,
was just like
yeah.
good decks. Yeah, so it's kind of weird. Usually it's not quite like that. It's usually the opposite.
Yeah.
It feels like.
Well, normally in Wild, it's like, hey, we're gonna play all the new stuff, even though it's not very good, just because it's new stuff, right? And then eventually people will like fall back to Secret Mage and
yeah,
like Darkglare Warlock and stuff like that. But it turns out the new stuff this time was Seedlock and Quest Hunter and
Yeah.
Quest Pirate Warrior, and it was like the busted stuff. So I feel like that's
Yeah.
maybe a little bit why it felt like that this time. So yeah, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up here. No Hands, thank you again for coming on the show and answering all of our questions about Standard, GM, and Wild. Appreciate you. So for all the people out there, you want to let them know where they can find you on Twitch and YouTube?
Yeah, I'm on twitch.tv/NoHandsGamer, youtube.com/ a bunch of random numbers, I think. It's not and Twitter, NoHandsGamer. So, you can find me in those spots. So, come hang out, play Standard. So, yeah.
And Corbin Roffle, thank you again for joining me this week. Let the people know where they can find you guys as well.
Sure, you can find me at RoffleHS on Twitter and Instagram, and at Roffle on Twitch and YouTube.
And you can find me at Corbettgames on Twitch and Twitter and YouTube and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, thank you again so much for listening, and thank you so much again, No Hands, for coming on the show. We've been trying to make this happen for a hot minute, and it's really nice that it came together. So thank you.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and good luck in the Master Tour coming up. Looking forward
yeah.
to watching that.
Yeah, the Mercenaries, like, it's gonna make everyone terrible. So it should be
Masters
easy
Tour
one.
Mercenaries. There you go. That's the new name.
Yeah. Yeah.
You guys can find me at Get Me Out, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, all that kind of good stuff. Again, appreciate all of you guys for listening all the way to the end, and we will catch you guys again next week. Later.